Undercover boss eats quietly, stops cold when waitress says she might quit due to poor tips. Not every rain makes your coat wet. Some arrive only to wash away the glossy layers once mistaken for success. A gray, rainy morning. The streets are still quiet. Droplets slide slowly down the windshield of a parked pickup truck just a few steps from Sunrise Diner, branch number 28. Inside the truck, a man around 50, wearing a worn wool coat and a low-brimmed cap, is reviewing a small notebook. It's not a menu. It's filled with notes on stable revenue, customer satisfaction metrics from the regional reports, and a list of resignation letters filed over the past 3 months. Derek Langston, CEO and founder of Sunrise Restaurant Group, once hailed as a business model built on a culture of staff respect. Branch number 28 was one of the first locations he opened once a symbol. But recently, although the numbers still look good, something isn't right. Reports say, no major complaints. But anonymous feedback reveals rude service, tense atmosphere, staff constantly changing, no one knows anyone's name. And Derek, who used to work the kitchen in this very diner 10 years ago, doesn't trust reports enough to just sit at headquarters. He turns off the engine, steps out, pulling his collar up against the drizzle. Under the coat is not a CEO, but Walt Simmons, a retired driver, walk-in breakfast customer. He pushes open the diner door. A soft chime rings. No one greets him. No one looks up. Only the scent of baked goods and coffee lingers in the strangely still air, as if the place now runs on habit, not purpose. Derek picks a table by the window, a good spot to watch the POS terminal, the kitchen hallway, and the corner where staff usually take their breaks. He hasn't come to eat. He came to hear the real heartbeat of a system that was once built by hand, but now seemed to be run by the glossy surface of attractive numbers. Sometimes, what wakes us up isn't the shouting, but a comment so quiet no one else bothers to notice. Derek ordered sunny-side-up eggs, toast, and black coffee simple, no different from hundreds of other customers who had passed through this place. But when the food arrived, he knew the server before him wasn't anything like what the reports had described. Cassie, sunrise uniform neat, hair tied in a bun, hands deftly balancing the tray. She didn't over-chatter, but neither was she cold. She was just busy in the way someone is when covering for too many roles at once. From Derek's angle, he could see her managing the entire stretch of tables from 3 to 11, pouring water, taking orders, wiping tables, bringing checks. Ryan and Jason, the 2 male servers, were standing at the POS counter, casually chatting, occasionally handling a stray transaction here and there. Derek took a sip of coffee. Then he asked Cassie, like a polite uncle trying to spark a light conversation, "Looks busy this morning. Tips are decent, I hope?" Cassie paused, not to think, but as if to weigh the level at which she should respond. Then she slightly bowed, her voice dropping to just above a whisper, audible to only the 2 of them. Morning shifts are the worst, especially when tip sharing only actually reaches a few people. That line wasn't an accusation, not a complaint, just a truth compressed down to a size small enough to survive. But for Derek, it was the first and deepest cut into the well-functioning facade his system had been dressed in. He watched her walk away, back to work. But in his mind, a question had already begun to echo. How could someone rated as patient and efficient be left out of the most basic sharing? The coffee had a rich aroma but suddenly tasted bitter, not because of the brew, but because he realized he'd just swallowed a truth no one had dared to touch. And from that moment, he knew this breakfast was no longer just an observation. It had just become the starting point of an investigation from the dining table itself. Some injustices don't show through obvious misconduct, but through arrangements subtle enough to keep the decent ones perpetually out of the game. Derek sat silently over his second cup of coffee. He was no longer observing as a customer, but as a man counting each footstep, each glance, each movement that seemed normal, yet repeated too consistently to be coincidence. Cassie ran between tables 4, 6, then looped to 9. Each tray she carried was full, each step uninterrupted. Ryan still stood near the POS. The device in his hands wasn't just a payment tool, it was the key to controlling the entire tip distribution system. Jason chatted leisurely, manning 4 empty tables in the far corner. Derek noticed. Transactions from the area Cassie served were mostly processed by Ryan. There were even moments when Cassie handed out the bill, and Ryan would step in to help swipe the card, then walk back to his spot without saying a word to her. That morning, Derek decided not to rely solely on what he could see. He texted his technical assistant at headquarters, branch 28, track transaction logs real time, especially POS Ryan. Just 10 minutes later, a reply came, Tip transactions from Cassie's tables assigned to Ryan's ID 3 times consecutively. The pattern matched, and Derek knew this wasn't a mistake. R1. After breakfast, Cassie returned to clear his plate. This time, she leaned in, whispering, not like someone afraid to speak, but someone no longer willing to stay silent. Did you notice Ryan always swiping the POS for me? I don't have POS access. Here, only assigned people are allowed. And the one assigned is the manager's nephew. Derek nodded silently, encouraging her to go on. Doug, the manager, sets everything up, and Ryan is his nephew. When I asked, they promised to split the tips after shift. It's great. But I started noticing the receipts were missing, so I started writing them down. Every shift, every table, every single tip. She pulled a small notebook from the pocket of her apron. The corners were worn, some pages stained with faint coffee marks. Inside were numbers neat, detailed, not a single day missing. When I added it up, I lost over $600 just last month. Did all the work, guessed tip properly, but by the end of the day, I walked home with nothing. End of die. Derek flipped through a few pages. There were days she recorded up to 12 tables, with expected tips over $90. But the amount received, $0. On some days, the system recorded Ryan's name for transactions from Zone A, which was clearly Cassie's full responsibility. He closed the notebook and handed it back to her with both hands, as if returning a rightful piece of evidence, not offering meaningless comfort. Aren't you afraid? He asked, his tone not mocking, just honest. Cassie looked him straight in the eye. For the first time that morning, I used to be, but if I'm doing everything right and still go unseen, then staying silent won't save anything either. Derek gently gripped the rim of his coffee cup. He once believed that the system he built was strong enough to protect the ones who actually did the work. But today, one notebook, one quiet sentence, and one silent server had shown him that it was the system itself that was pushing them out. And if that was true, then what needed to change wasn't just the people. It was the very way decent workers were allowed to exist within the system. And forwarded. Derek left the diner by late morning without saying another word, without leaving a tip. But what Cassie didn't know was that 20 minutes later, a detailed POS transaction report had already landed in his encrypted internal inbox. The first line read, 8:42 a.m., Table 6, order total, $28.5, tip, $5, processed by R. Douglas, error, Douglas. 3 transactions in a row, all 3 tables from Cassie's section. Derek scrolled to the bottom. Another transaction stood out, a takeaway order processed under the name J. Cassie, but the system confirmed. Cassie had never been issued a login. Was it a fake account or just the trace of an edited entry? He called Mara, head of internal investigations. I need pause access rights at branch 28 verified. And check for me. How many staff have had shifts cut after filing complaints? Mara paused a moment, then said, just in the last 3 months alone, there have been 6 cases, all from the morning shift. 2 of them are no longer in the system, marked as resigned voluntarily, but there's no email confirmation from either. Derek slumped forward onto the steering wheel, his chest tightening. Not because he was shocked, but because every clue pointed to the same truth. This wasn't a staffing issue anymore. It was a culture corrupted. A system originally built to support frontline servers was now being operated like a trap. Those who didn't know how to stay silent were the first to go. Meanwhile, the ones manipulating the system were the ones being held up as model representatives. And that very night, Derek ordered the tech team to enable real-time monitoring across all POS terminals at branch number 28. Any unusual transaction would be sent directly to the central system. Every edit made permanently logged and unerasable. He signed off on a memorandum that read, full administrative access of the branch manager is suspended until an independent audit is completed. All resignation records within the past 30 days may be appealed directly to the CEO. The first person I want to speak with is named Cassie. N60. The next morning, Cassie received a call from a number she didn't recognize from headquarters. She picked up, her voice still raspy. Cassie, this is Derek Langston. Thank you for writing everything down instead of walking away. I need you to keep going, but this time, you won't be doing it alone. She went silent, unsure how to respond. Her eyes drifted down to the notebook already lying open since morning, as if it had been waiting for this all along. The rain had let up, but the things that needed fixing had only just begun to surface. And this time, Cassie was no longer just an empty line in the end-of-shift tip report. She was living proof. that silence was never meant to be the only option. Some Friday mornings start like any other, until the truth lights up in the middle of a crowded diner. 9:03 a.m. rush hour at Sunrise Diner, branch number 28. Inside, everything appears to run normally. Ryan stands by the POS, tapping away efficiently, greeting customers with a half smile. Megan stands beside him, arms crossed, occasionally adjusting her collar. Cassie is still running the floor just like every morning, but today, her gaze drifts toward the door from time to time. Not because she's waiting for a customer, but because of a feeling. And then, exactly 9:06 a.m., the door swings open. Derek Langston steps inside. No more ball cap, no more worn coat. Just the CEO and founder of Sunrise Restaurant Group composed, purposeful, holding a small device, eyes not observing anymore, but confronting. The air in the room drops a beat. Cassie freezes mid-step. Henry, wiping trays near the back, goes still. Doug, emerging from the back office, starts forming a polite smile, but it dies halfway. Derek says nothing. He walks straight to the POS terminal and plugs the device into the large screen, usually used to display the day specials. One tap, a shift in brightness, and then the first video begins to play. Clip 1. Ryan, during the morning shift, taps rapidly on the POS, swiping a card, entering a code, then selecting the name R. Douglas for a transaction from table 6, the very table Cassie was serving. Clip 2. Megan refuses service to a middle-aged woman with a young child. Her voice, ice cold. If you don't have the money, come back later. This place isn't a soup kitchen. Clip 3. Henry, slightly hunched, waits until everyone is gone. He opens his wallet, quietly pulls out 2 $1 bills, and drops them into the tip jar for table 9, the same woman who had just been turned away. No dialogue. No music. Only the truth standing at the center of the diner, raw, undeniable. Derek turns around. His voice isn't loud, but each word drops like metal. I'm the one who laid the foundation for Sunrise Diner, and I once said, the people who serve customers deserve to be served by the system. But what I see here is abuse of power. Employees pushed out of the tip pool. Hardworking staff buried under the names of those who just know how to stand in the right place. He turned directly to Doug. You trusted to manage, chose to reshape the system so your family could benefit. Then to Ryan. You swiping cards on others' behalf, used that trust to pocket money that wasn't yours. A nod. Mara, head of internal investigations, stepped forward, holding 2 files. Doug Henderson suspended and referred for legal investigation on internal fraud. Ryan Douglas contract terminated immediately. All system access revoked. Derek turned to the stunned staff, some confused, some relieved. From today, Sunrise will overhaul its entire tip-sharing system. Every transaction transparent. Every tip tagged in real time with the name of the actual server. No more supporting roles. No more wait till end of shift redistribution. He paused in front of Cassie. Didn't say a word. Just placed a small folded note on the tray she was holding. Simple words written. Every decent person deserves a system that stands with them. Morning light filtered through the dusty windows. For the first time in months, the air inside Sunrise Diner wasn't thick with silence. It was beginning to return to its true rhythm. The room remained quiet, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of something finally being called by its right name after too many days of being hidden beneath the label of business as usual. Megan stepped back, her arms dropped, her eyes darting as if searching for an exit. But this time, no one nodded in agreement. Ryan stood frozen not because he didn't know what was happening, but because he never thought that day would actually come. At a table near the window, an elderly guest placed his teacup down, then gently tapped the table 2 beats, then stopped. No one asked him to do it, but the sound, soft and steady, felt like a new rhythm had just been set. Derek turned his gaze toward Cassie, still standing in the middle of the diner, tray in hand, unmoved. He didn't need to say another word. But this time, Cassie did something she had never done before. She lifted her chin. She gave a slight nod, as if her previous answer to the question, "Are you afraid?" now had a different ending. At the end of the counter, Henry set down his towel, stepped forward, and approached the video monitor, which was now dimming. He looked at Derek and said, "Thank you for not letting this just be wrapped up in an email." And so Derek nodded his eyes, not exactly soft, but clear, the look of a man who had just pulled a system back from its gray zone. At that moment, Roy, the longtime head chef, stepped out from the kitchen, removing his apron. "We don't need a new poster. We just need to know that when we clock in, we're not invisible." Derek slowly walked through the diner. He looked at each person not to judge, but to assess how many strong parts remained, waiting to be revived. Then he spoke not as a lecture, but as a collective affirmation. A system isn't built to keep the best people. It's built so that the good ones don't have to ask themselves every day whether they should still keep going. And in that moment, Cassie tightened her grip on the folded note he'd left. Not out of fear, but as if she were finally holding the answer she'd waited so long for. That silent effort, at last, had a place to land. The pause monitor shut off, but no one left. Someone started wiping down the counter again. Someone else adjusted their name tag. The air inside the diner remained busy, but it was no longer restless. Because from that morning on, Sunrise Diner didn't just operate, it began to come alive again. Justice doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs to be held steady by people who don't abandon decency, even when no one stands beside them. 1 month later, Sunrise Diner, branch number 28, still opened at 6 a.m. as usual. But the atmosphere inside had changed. Not because of a new menu or a freshly painted counter, but because the system had begun to see the people it once rendered invisible. Near the POS terminal, a new digital screen had been mounted on the wall. It didn't play ads or rotate food images. Instead, it displayed clean, clear lines of text. Tip sharing, real-time, verified, public, 846, table 7 to 20. Cassie, 849, table 4 to 4 to Ford. Ben, 852, table 10, $2. 75, Jasmine. No more, we'll split it at the end of the shift. No more POS operator holding the keys to trust. Now, if you do the work, you get to see it. Not through promises, but through the system. And Cassie, the one who once tracked every lost tip in a worn-out notebook, no longer carried a tray. She now stood among a group of new staff at branch number 36, no longer a server, but a regional training manager. Her voice was calm and soft, as always, but this time it carried something she never had before. The power to redefine fairness through the very path she had walked herself. Here, you don't need to be the fastest. You just need to be real. If everyone holds up their end of the work, the system will take care of the rest. In second, one early morning, Derek returned to branch number 28. No announcement, no title. Just a man quietly sitting at the same corner booth, the place where he once drank his first cup of coffee under the name Walt Simmons. He finished his breakfast, dabbed his mouth with a napkin, and before leaving, tucked a folded $20 bill under the plate of leftover pastry. Beneath it, a handwritten note with just 8 words. Thank you for holding on to integrity, even when no one stood up for you. No one knew who he was. But Cassie, while clearing the table, glanced briefly at the note, then folded it and quietly slipped it into her new notebook, the one where she was recording the final error patches of the old system. Cassie held the paper in her hand longer than usual, not because she didn't know what to do with it, but because for the first time a message of recognition came without a promise. No proposal, no suggestion, just a simple thank you at the right moment for the right person. She didn't cry, but her chest tightened as if, after all the months spent wondering, does anyone see me? This paper was the final answer. Yes, and the person who saw her was the one who had designed the entire system. That evening, in the training office at the new branch, Cassie pinned that note to the inside of her locker door, where only she would see it at the end of every shift. Just below it, she taped another note, written in her own handwriting. Every system begins with trust, and it collapses the moment that trust is removed from real people. The following week, she led her first training session at branch number 42, which had just received 3 resignation letters citing unclear scheduling. At the start, Cassie didn't open a slide deck like usual. She simply stepped to the center of the room, held up her old, frayed notebook. Who here has ever done the right thing? But no one noticed? A few hands went up, hesitantly. A few eyes turned away. And then, someone began to nod. Cassie didn't ask for names. She just placed the notebook on the table and opened to the first page, where it once read, Table 6, $15, not received. I used to think I was just a powerless employee, but it turns out I was the starting point for redesigning the entire system. No title needed, just a notebook, and one person who refused to stay silent forever. 1 month later, at the company's headquarters, Derek received the internal report from HR. At the very bottom of the file, a small note was attached. Anonymous complaint rate down 38% from last quarter. But the most notable change, the number of thank you notes sent from branches to regional managers has doubled. Derek didn't respond. He simply printed the report, folded it, and tucked it into the inner pocket of his work journal on the newest page. On that page, he wrote one more line by hand. Never forget those who stay silent the longest are often the ones who once hoped the system would fix itself. But if we don't stand up, they will have to walk away just to protect their dignity. Kindness isn't something that only gains value when it's recognized. It is a principle, one that must be built into the way a system operates every single day. Because sometimes it's not that the process is broken. It's that we've forgotten a process exists to serve people, not to erase them legally.